In the Arctic Circle, an airplane pilot lies sprawled in the snow as if attempting to draw a figure. On his uniform is written only his surname, Overgaard, and he appears to be the sole survivor at the crash site. As soon as he finishes his work, it is revealed that he has formed the acronym SOS, indicating that he is lost in the middle of the Arctic and needs rescue. Apparently, Overgaard executed a forced landing, and the plane's engines were destroyed on impact. He has been out in the snow for days and is doing everything he can to survive in this inhospitable environment, all the while waiting for help. To feed himself, the pilot has devised an ice fishing system. He has cut 3 holes in a frozen lake using lines and bait tied to sticks. Thanks to this, he can eat during the day and stores a supply of fish in a cooler. After another meal, Overgaard gathers his gear and climbs a nearby hill to survey the surroundings in hopes of spotting a search plane or helicopter. Over the days, he has sketched a map of his location and sends emergency signals via his rescue beacon. The device operates by turning a crank, and a red light indicates the signal is being sent. If there is a response, the beacon's light will turn green. Since the crash, Overgaard has spent hours activating the beacon, but so far, no one has answered his call. As nightfall grows more intense, forcing the pilot to return to the plane and conserve his energy for another day of struggle for survival. The next morning, Overgaard recreates the SOS message in the snow, but first goes to a small pile of stones near a hill. He pauses there to bid farewell to someone, indicating that these stones mark the grave of another crew member who likely perished in the accident. After paying his respects, he returns to clear away as many stones as he can find to make the letters clear. His goal is to make the message visible enough for another pilot flying overhead to see. Finally, Overgaard checks his fishing holes, only to discover that all his hooks are empty. Beside one of the holes, he sees a huge paw print, likely that of a polar predator. Fearing it may be a polar bear, the pilot races back to the plane and locks himself inside until he is sure it is safe to venture out. Once the coast is clear, he climbs in and triggers his distress flare, hoping the green light will appear. Yet the result remains the same, no response. Deciding to explore the area, Overgaard soon spots a massive polar bear at a distance, stalking for food. With no other option, he returns to the plane and falls asleep before resuming his routine the following day. However, no rescue arrives, and his fish supply slowly dwindles. All he can do is keep trying to send distress signals, but after hours of effort, Overgaard nearly gives up. Suddenly, the beacon light turns green, indicating his signal has been received. The pilot hurries to spot the source of the response and, looking toward the horizon, sees a helicopter flying overhead. Quickly, Overgaard approaches the craft and fires a smoke flare so they can spot him. Luckily, the helicopter crew sees the survivor and prepares to land, but a fierce storm causes the aircraft to lose control and the pilot is forced to pull away. To make matters worse, the helicopter grows increasingly unstable and must execute an emergency landing, crashing into the snowy ground. Rushing to the scene, Overgaard finds the helicopter pilot dead from impact injuries. He then discovers a second crew member still alive, but suffering a severe abdominal wound. Overgaard grabs the helicopter's first aid kit and, using a clamp, ties off the wound to stop the bleeding. But the blizzard is intensifying and there is no way to return to the plane. All that remains is to rest inside the helicopter and wait for the storm to pass. Hours go by and the weather calms. Overgaard checks that the survivor is stable and surveys the equipment inside the cabin. In addition to ropes, he finds an ice axe and some cups of instant noodles. After days of eating only fish, he wastes no time heating water to cook and eats the noodles directly. But time is short. He must return to the plane before another storm erupts. Unfortunately, the second helicopter passenger did not survive the crash, but Overgaard is determined to get the surviving crew member treated. After gathering every bit of usable gear, he writes a message on the helicopter fuselage. 2 survivors have gone to the valley from where our plane crashed. Please help us. Then Overgaard begins walking back, carrying the injured crew member toward his aircraft. Once they reach it, he asks the young woman her name, but she doesn't understand his language and only says the word pilot. When he asks about her companion in the helicopter, Overgaard tells her that her partner did not survive and asks her to wait in the plane while he inspects the helicopter. As soon as the woman falls asleep, the pilot returns to the crash site and finds his companion's body entirely buried by snow. As before, Overgaard buries him with stones out of respect. Back at the helicopter's interior, he locates a map, a lighter, a small gasoline tank, and a makeshift stove stand. He also finds a photograph that moves him, which he pockets in his jacket. Further inspection yields a sled in the cargo compartment, which he repurposes to carry the remaining gear. Once back in the plane, he places the photo beside the surviving woman, and it's revealed the image is of her family, indicating she and the pilot had been married and had a small child together. She remains asleep, so Overgaard cleans her wound with medicine. Then days pass, and Overgaard continues sending distress calls. Still without reply, he begins to worry about how he can save the young survivor, whose condition appears to be worsening. She coughs constantly through the night. The following morning, he observes her again, and to his surprise, she grasps his hand in gratitude for all he has done. This renews his determination to find a way out, and he consults the map once more. The trek to the nearest village will take days, but there is a shortcut through the mountains that could get them there faster. Deciding to risk it in the Arctic, Overgaard readies more ropes and fishing bait, keeping as many supplies in reserve as possible, then loads the gear and the unconscious woman onto the sled inside a sleeping bag to protect her from the cold. He hitches the sled over his shoulders and begins pulling, heading out over the vast ice. However, upon closer inspection of the map, night begins to fall. Overgaard scrawls in the snow once more, then digs out a small cave where they can rest. He continues feeding and hydrating the woman, and both eventually fall asleep, hoping no polar bears will find them in the night. At dawn, Overgaard emerges again, bundles up with extra clothing and a mask. Another storm is brewing. On the trail, he discovers a gear cache buried under snow and hopes it belongs to another survivor. But upon closer look, it turns out to be his own equipment he had left days earlier while attempting to cross the Arctic alone. Inside an old crate, he finds his former ID card, revealing that he was part of the Experimental Aviation Association, EAA, a group that builds, restores, and flies various aircraft. It seems he had ventured out in one of the experimental planes but couldn't endure the Arctic conditions and crashed. Realizing there's no point in lamenting his fate, Overgaard presses on, determined to reach his goal as quickly as possible. The journey continues until he encounters an unmapped mountain. Undeterred, he uses the ice axe from the helicopter to climb the mountain and finds a flat pass on the other side. He hauls the sled over with ropes, then tries the same with the woman, but it proves far more difficult. No matter how hard he pulls, the sled is too heavy. The rope slips from his hands and the sled slides to the bottom of the slope. Seeing he cannot drag it up, the pilot abandons that path and opts to go around the mountain, taking a longer route. He resumes the trek but must pause again to rest and eat. He finds a cave under some rocks, its entrance blocked by snow, and digs it out using his gear. Inside, he uses the gasoline tank to cook leftover fish, tries to feed the young woman despite her weakening condition. With night approaching, their only option is to sleep. But suddenly, Overgaard hears something approaching, an animal's roar followed by heavy breathing. Carefully, the pilot grips his ice axe, fearing the worst. Seconds pass in silence before Overgaard believes the animal has moved on. But for the woman, relief is fleeting. She coughs loudly, attracting the attention of a huge polar bear that roars furiously and tries to force its way into the cave. The opening is too small, yet the bear insists, clawing at the snow and poking its head inside. Overgaard shouts at it and waves a flare in the air to scare it off. His plan works. The fire frightens the bear, and it retreats, the two survivors alone. Despite his bravery, Overgaard collapses in exhaustion and panic, muttering to himself that everything will be all right. Another day passes. The pilot leaves the cave to scout, and luckily finds no signs of the bear. Still, the area is unsafe. If it returns, they may not be so fortunate. So, with the woman on the sled, Overgaard continues pulling them forward. After a few more meters, a fierce blizzard blows in, reducing his visibility and forcing him to stop. There is no cave nearby, and continuing would only exhaust him further. The only solution is to share the sleeping bag with the woman to keep warm in this desperate situation. Hours crawl by until the storm finally abates, and the two lie buried in snow. Overgaard emerges and checks his gear for damage. He finds his water bottle, but it is completely. He uses his body heat to melt the ice by placing the bottle inside his jacket. He then readies the sled for another long stretch until he reaches a patch of very soft snow that makes movement nearly impossible. Fatigue overwhelms him, and he must rest again near a rocky outcrop. There, he lights a fire to warm themselves. Overgaard asks the woman to squeeze his hands to generate mutual warmth and maintain circulation. She remains unconscious and breathes with difficulty, a sign her condition is deteriorating. When he inspects her wound, he realizes it grows more infected each day and sees blood coming from her mouth. Fearing she won't last much longer, and scolding himself in. Overgaard reluctantly decides to leave her behind and continue alone, knowing that in their current state, neither would survive. Carrying only his gear, the pilot pushes on along the route until he spots a rock bed covered in flowers. Surprised, he steps forward, only for the ground beneath him to give way. He tumbles into a hole and later awakens in a cave with his right leg trapped under a rock. The Arctic cold numbs him, but he struggles desperately to free himself, though the pain is excruciating. Finally, his leg snaps free of the snow, but is badly injured. Now, he must crawl through the snow and rocks to escape. Soon, he finds an exit from the cave, and although he is in agony, he makes it out. He returns to where he left the woman and retrieves the family photo from his jacket to give it to her child if he ever reaches safety. To his surprise, she is still alive and speaks to him, seeming a bit stronger. Overgaard immediately regrets having considered abandoning her and weeps as he apologizes. He comforts her, promising everything will be fine, and resumes pulling the sled despite his injuries. Before pressing on, he examines his wound, finding it worse than he thought. No way to properly treat it, he improvises by packing the cut with ice and cloth to stem the bleeding. Then he continues dragging the sled, ignoring the pain and exhaustion. At one point, he offers the woman the last drops of water, then fills the bottle with snow and drinks some to partly soothe his relentless thirst. He consults the map and realizes there is still a long way to go. Fatigue again bears down on him, and his condition worsens when he reaches higher ground and tries to use an iron bar as a crutch. But his leg injury makes it nearly impossible. Finally, he must stop and check his rescue, only to discover it is broken from the storm. Without this lifeline, Overgaard drags himself to the top of a hill, hoping to glimpse someone or something. There, in the distance, he spots a helicopter landing nearby. Summoning his remaining strength, Overgaard pushes the sled up to the crest, shouting for help even though his voice is barely audible. All he can do is ignite his last and wave his arms in desperation. The helicopter crew does not notice, and the aircraft begins to lift off. Any hope seems lost as the machine climbs into the sky. Overgaard lifts the woman onto the sled and pleads with the departing crew to see them. He just wants them to be saved. But the helicopter is already too far, and any chance of surviving appears to have vanished. Exhausted, he lies down beside the woman in the snow, promising both her and himself that everything will be okay, then drifts unconsciousness. Suddenly, a fierce wind sweeps across the plain, and the same helicopter returns and lands right in front of them. The couple has finally been rescued.